Legend of Oakenthor. Scroll 2. The horseman drove hard. Scattering stones from the forest track, his steed pressed on at his master's unrelenting command. He could see the castle now in the distance, displaying flags at half-mast, flags that drooped in the still morning air, an air whose dampness seemed to pervade every tree in the woods, the stones of the dwellings, the minds of every king's subject. The heavy gates were heaved open with a mournful creak as the messenger approached and closed behind him with a thud that spoke of duty and finality. He dismounted, ascended a short flight of steps, and signaled to guards who gave him immediate audience with the king. With labored breath and a furrowed brow, he delivered his urgent report.
"Your Majesty, I've heard from a reliable source that there was a meeting of the city's elders in Absalom last night. They are, right now, planning to break away from the kingdom and are already seeking support from the surrounding shires."
King Sapler felt a wave of shock pass through his mind and a draining of vitality from his body.
Absalom was not only a highly fortified city, it was a prosperous port with a hinterland rich in natural resources, of timber and marble renowned across the known world, all of which would ensure they could finance their independent state indefinitely. But there was an added layer of personal betrayal in this conspiracy. The Earl of Absalom was his own cousin, Tyrion.
Sapler felt weak, undermined, betrayed.
He slumped back in his chair and stared at the floor, wishing that his father was there to take command. Prince Ethan had often been given practice in this kind of thing. His father would quiz him about how he'd respond to all manner of challenging scenarios, testing and developing his abilities to assess situations and make decisions when the heat was on.
Sapler had never been invited to join such conversations,
and only caught a little of what they discussed as he played nearby. Ethan was the heir, the favored one, so it was only right that he be trained this way.
But now Sapler had this kingdom thrust into his uneasy hands and, with no one to call upon for advice, his mind froze.
Stuck with the belief that whatever he did would likely be the wrong thing to do. Why couldn't he have an easy test in his first week as monarch?
"Your Majesty?"
The messenger inquired with some urgency.
All Sapler could muster was a weak,
Yes, thank you. I'll... But his words trailed to a blank. He didn't know what to do. Not at all.
"Should your armies make ready?"
The messenger inquired, with not a little frustration.
But Sapler said nothing.
Then, trying to maintain appropriate respect for the orphan king, the unready king, he pressed more emphatically, "Should we not at least dispatch spies, Your Majesty?" The messenger took a deep breath. He realized that hounding was not going to help, and the new king needed some distinct support.
"When your father faced a challenge that he was not
Immediately sure how to handle, he would call upon his council," he more gently proffered.
A curious look came across Sapler's face, and he looked up.
"His council? His royal advisers?"
"Yes, Your Majesty, and more than mere advisers. These men and women were those your father relied upon, not only for their insight on a range of matters, but also for their ability to carry out his bidding."
Within the hour, the king's council chamber had been made ready. It was an elegant room at the eastern end of the castle, its walls covered with coats of arms and tapestries that depicted life in each of the shires and the battles they had fought against aggressive foreign powers and marauders from the outer isles. 4 chairs were now filled around an oval table. There was a large, heavily decorated chair for the king, and one further seat that remained empty.
King Sapler took his place at the head of the table and addressed the noble assembly before him.
"Prince Ethan was almost certainly better acquainted with you than I am," he started hesitantly. "I have to confess, I only know some of your names. So, to make a start, can you each please tell me who you are and the role you played as an advisor to my father?"
Immediately a broad man stood up, his military role clearly evident from his attire. "Well, You do know me, your majesty. I am Armidig, general of the king's armies. He promptly sat down, as if all that anyone needed to say had just been said. The woman opposite Armidig was the next to stand and address the king. Her eyes seemed to embrace him with a motherly acceptance before any words had left her lips.
I am Freya. I have been reporting to the king on home affairs, all issues concerning our own people, for many years. After the untimely loss of Medatus, our chief negotiator, I have also assumed responsibility for all diplomatic relations with foreign powers.
As Freya took her seat, a lean man beside her, with face engraved with lines of learning, of study and deep thought, stood and gave a slight bow.
And I am Sagittus. I have been the keeper of the royal archives for over 25 years. Your father would regularly seek my wisdom, reasoning, and objective advice on matters of state, political strategy, and details of our country's history.
As he concluded, he glanced toward an elegant lady in a deep crimson robe on the other side of the table, who rose and faced the king to reveal her name.
Tekoya, your servant. I have a responsibility over all matters of faith and spiritual well-being, directly regarding the royal household, but also across the realm.
Sapler noted the authority and gravitas of these people now seated before him. He felt that they were so much more capable, experienced, and confident than he was, and his personal sense of inadequacy only increased. What had he ever achieved of any note? Yet, what chance had he ever been given? He grappled with the swirling cloud of dark inner voices. Yet Sapler was no pretender. His honesty, they would all soon admit, was completely disarming and had an almost magnetic effect on those he spoke to.
I have to admit that everything's happening a bit too fast for me to keep up with right now. So I'm going to need to lean on you, as my father's advisors, to help me determine a best course of action as we tackle this troubling situation at Absalom.
He felt he could continue, but Freya indicated she had something to add and politely interrupted. There is another still to come, your majesty. Armidig rolled his eyes but said nothing. A moment later, there was a disturbance at the door. Into the room leaped a man dressed in the strangest of clothes, and pockets stuffed with boxes, colored handkerchiefs, dice, coins, and all manner of other trinkets. Hugo, the court jester, bounded over to the fifth and final seat in the chamber. He made no excuse of any kind for being late, and Sapler looked at him, rather bemused. He knew Hugo well enough, but was quite certain that this court jester was performing another one of his rather inappropriate practical jokes and interrupting what ought to be a serious meeting. He was about to ask his counsel who it was they were really expecting, when Tekoya stood once more, faced the king, and formally enunciated, "Your Majesty, your council is now convened."